Imagine being in a candlelit room at midnight, the air thick with incense, shadows flickering against the walls as ancient words echo in a language you don't understand. Words not meant for human tongues. This is how it always begins. A curious hand turning the wrong page in a forbidden book. A seeker of power, whispering names they should never dare to speak aloud. And those names, they do not go unheard. For as long as humanity has existed, there have been rituals, doorways carved out of sound, blood, and intention, ways to summon beings from beyond. Some are harmless illusions of the mind, shadows we mistake for gods or spirits. But others are not illusions. They are real. They wait. They hunger. They listen. And tonight, we will descend into the abyss and confront them, the world's darkest esoteric entities, whispered in forbidden texts, drawn in sigils that shiver with malice, and feared by occultists across centuries. Entities you should never summon, unless you wish to invite terror into every breath you take. Of course, some of you listening might be thinking, oh, come on, it's just myth, just superstition, right? Stories made up by desperate priests and power-hungry magicians? Perhaps. But myths have a way of bleeding into reality. And if myths are only stories, why do so many who spoke these names vanish? Why do those who perform these rituals leave behind journals scrawled in fear, begging no one to follow their path? Let me tell you about one. In the year 1572, a German alchemist by the name of Johann Sprenger recorded a ritual in his hidden manuscript, Liber Tenebris. He wrote of a being called Kael'tor, the devourer of echoes. A creature that feeds not on flesh, but on the last breath of words spoken by the dying. Sprenger claimed that summoning Kael'tor required a silver bowl filled with blood warmed by fire, and an incantation spoken backwards in a deserted church. He tried it, and according to the fragments of his writings, what came was not a vision, not a dream, but a shadow with eyes like burning coals. He wrote, "It did not move, it waited. It smiled though it had no mouth, and it repeated my thoughts before I could even speak them." Days later, Sprenger was found dead, his tongue blackened, his last words echoing strangely from the walls of his home. Now, was this just the madness of a lonely alchemist? Perhaps. But the name Kael'tor appears again, in whispered prayers from rural Romania, in the footnotes of French grimoires, and even in a secret Vatican document cataloging entities too dangerous to classify. Dangerous. And Kael'tor is only one. There are others. Take, for instance, the Arbiter of the Ashen Veil, known in some occult traditions as Zerachiel, the Broken Wing. Unlike angels or demons, this entity does not claim dominion over heaven or hell. Instead, it is said to reside in the space between prayers. Think about that. Every time someone prays, there is a pause, a silence between words, and Zerachiel is believed to exist in that silence, feeding on the desperation of unanswered faith. Ancient mystics described Zerachiel as a tall figure cloaked in feathers, each feather etched with the screams of those who begged for help and received none. Summoning him requires a circle of ash made from burnt holy scripture and the prayer of someone who no longer believes in salvation. A dangerous act, because once he appears, he does not vanish until the summoner whispers their greatest doubt aloud. And when they do, Zerachiel takes it from them. Their doubt, their hope, their faith, everything, leaving behind a hollow shell. And yet, despite these warnings, people still try. They always try. Why? Because power corrupts curiosity. Because desperation drives risk. Because some believe that making a deal with the forbidden can grant them what no god, no demon, no angel ever would: immortality, wealth, knowledge, revenge. But what if I told you there is an entity, one even darker than the rest, who doesn't deal, doesn't bargain, doesn't even pretend to listen? It simply takes. Its name is whispered as the Eclipsed One. Described in fragmented Akkadian texts, this being was said to emerge only during solar eclipses, when the sun was devoured by shadow. Priests warned that the eclipse was not a natural event, but a feeding ritual, the Eclipsed One devouring the light to draw strength. Summoning it, the texts claim, requires only a mirror placed in direct view of the eclipse and the blood of the summoner dripped across its surface. The mirror then darkens, and something stares back. One clay tablet describes the face of this being as a shifting mass of eyes, some human, some not, opening and closing like wounds. The priests wrote that those who summoned it never lived past 7 days, their bodies found pale, their eyes missing, their mouths stretched wide as if screaming eternally. And here's the chilling part. In 1999, during a solar eclipse in Europe, a French occult group calling themselves Les Filles de l'Ombre disappeared completely. Their hideout was found abandoned, except for a cracked mirror, streaked with dried blood. Coincidence? Or proof that the ancient texts were right? As we move deeper, you'll notice a pattern. Each entity is tied to silence, to absence, to shadows between moments. They do not come from grand heavens or fiery hells, but from the cracks in reality itself. And that is perhaps what makes them most terrifying. Because how do you defend yourself against something that thrives in the spaces you cannot see? How do you fight what feeds on the silence between your own heartbeats? There are things older than angels, older than demons, things that were not created to punish nor to bless, but simply to exist in the gaps of being. To summon them is not to gain a servant, but to welcome a predator. And yet texts, grimoires, and whispered traditions persist, giving us the methods, the sigils, the sacrifices, tempting us to call them forth. But if you think this is all distant history, something locked away in dusty tomes and forgotten ruins, think again. Because even now, in the modern age, there are those who still perform these rituals, and some of them have left behind recordings, testimonies, even videos that authorities quickly suppress or dismiss as hoaxes. But when you look closer, when you listen carefully, the fear in their voices is too real. And that, my friends, is where we must tread carefully, because the deeper we go, the more dangerous the names become. And the next entity I will tell you about is one that even hardened occultists refuse to whisper aloud. Its name is Nerithis, the Forgotten Judge. This is not a demon in the classical sense, nor an angel fallen from grace. It is something stranger, something colder. Described in Coptic texts, hidden beneath desert monasteries, Nerithis is said to dwell in the silence that follows guilt. That heavy, suffocating pause after one realizes what cannot be undone. It is judgment made flesh. Accounts say Nerithis appears as a faceless figure in black robes, with scales instead of hands, each tipped with fragments of bone. On one side of the scale, ash. On the other side, light. Summoners claimed that the ritual was simple, to confess their greatest sin in the dark while dripping wax upon the scales. But once summoned, Nerithis never leaves. Never. One monk wrote that after calling Nerithis, he could no longer be alone. He would hear footsteps in the corridor, feel the weight of someone sitting beside him. He begged for forgiveness, but the judge only listened, only waited. And when he finally died, his body was discovered intact, except for the heart, missing as though weighed and taken. You see, unlike other entities, Nerithis doesn't attack, it doesn't tempt. It simply observes, waiting for the moment when guilt outweighs the soul. That is why even hardened occultists will not speak its name, for to speak is to summon, and to summon is to be weighed. And once you are weighed, the verdict never changes. But Nerithis is not alone in this catalogue of terror. There are others, each one stranger, darker, more unrelenting. Let us go deeper, if you dare. Another entity whispered through Tibetan demon scrolls is called Sha-Morai, the Black Maw. Unlike most beings, Sha-Morai is said to dwell not in silence, but in hunger. Described as an endless mouth filled with tongues, it feeds not on flesh, but on every word spoken in its presence, every syllable, every thought carried into air. Occultists believed that summoning Sha-Morai required one simple act, silence broken by chanting. The more one speaks, the more it devours, until the summoner is left mute, unable to form words ever again. Mute. One chilling diary from 1894 describes a summoner who attempted this ritual in Calcutta. His last journal entry was frantic, written in blood across the floorboards. It ate the sound of my name. I tried to scream, but only silence came out. The maw waits. It waits for more. He was found days later, lips torn apart, as if he had tried to force words back into existence. Do you understand? There are things that do not kill the body, but erase what makes us human. Our voice, our ability to cry for help, our very name. And yet, people still think summoning is a game. Now, there is one more that must be spoken of, though even I hesitate. It is known as Kael'tor, the Hollow Flame. Kael'tor appears in fragments of Phoenician fire cult texts, described as a burning figure with no core, a flame shaped like a man, yet empty inside. Rituals speak of igniting black oil mixed with salt, chanting in rhythm until the flame bends into form. But Kael'tor does not burn wood or cloth or flesh. It burns memory. Yes, memory. Summoners reported that after calling Kael'tor, fire consumed their recollections, their childhood faces, their loved ones, their very identities. One survivor wrote, "It took my mother's voice. I remember her face, but the sound of her laughter is gone. The fire keeps it." Another wrote, "I looked into its flames, and my own name crumbled like ash." To summon Kael'tor is to risk erasing yourself from within, leaving only an empty shell that walks, breathes, but remembers nothing. Imagine that fate. To be alive, yet hollow. And so the question remains, why? Why summon such beings? Why risk everything? The answer is as old as humanity itself. Desire. Power, forbidden knowledge. Some believe these entities hold secrets of creation, keys to immortality, whispers of truths buried before the dawn of man. And perhaps they do. But here is the truth hidden in every grimoire and every whispered tradition. They do not give without taking. Every gift is a curse. Every whisper costs a scream. Every moment of power drains the soul. And so, the world's darkest esoteric entities remain unbound only by silence. They are chained not by ritual, but by our refusal to call their names. Yet, people still call them. Which brings me to the final and most terrifying part of this journey. There is one entity older than the rest, nameless in most texts. Some call it the Nameless Hunger. Others simply the thing that answers.